Welcome to the WriterDojo with your host, Steve Diamond.
That's me.
And Larry Correia.
Coon.
Today's episode, the discipline of idea management.
All right. Okay, Larry. So we've talked a lot so far about, the various processes that we go through. We've talked about, how to basically take ourselves and our processes seriously and try to move them forward into creating things that, as you always say, that someone is willing to pay you money for.
Yeah. The thing is like, where do ideas come from, and how do we?
Oh my gosh.
How do we use them?
You know what? How many signings has someone asked you, hey, where do you get your ideas from?
Larry?
That
is actually probably, if I had to say, one of the single most common questions that I get, besides, Larry, why are you such a jerk, is where do ideas come from? Or where do I get ideas? Or you always hear about, and I've had this a few times, and I heard this from a lot of writers, where somebody comes up to you and they're like, hey, I've got this really awesome idea. How about we team up and you do that whole big writing a book part of 6 to 10 months of labor, and I'll give you my awesome idea, and then we can share the profits.
Right, because that's fair.
Because that's how it works. No, the thing is, ideas are actually the easiest part.
Ideas are a dime a dozen.
If you're in this business, or you want to be in this business, and you don't have any ideas, I got some bad news for you. This might not be the career for you.
Right. You know what? Before we dive in, let's talk about the danger here, okay? I know a person who, and I'm going to carefully avoid using names and such to protect the anonymity of the guilty. But this person decided that writing a book was going to be an awesome idea, and they were going to do it, okay? Kudos.
Cool. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Good for them.
That's what we tell every single person that comes up to us and says, hey, I want to be an author. We're like, sweet, high fives, go for it.
Here's my encouragement.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead and, enjoy your next 12 to 18 months of figuring this out. Right? So what this person did is quit their job.
Oh.
Okay. Because their parent offered to basically subsidize them for a period of a year.
Oh.
So that they could do nothing but sitting down and going through the writing process and writing a book and selling it all within a year, which, if you know anything about the writing process, it's slow and it's glacial. Even if you write your book in a month, the whole idea of taking that and selling it and getting it published and all of that stuff, it's a slow process.
Yeah, it takes a while.
Unless you're self-published and
even then,
it's, man, there are hoops to jump through.
You're not going to build an audience in a year.
Absolutely not.
I mean, unless you're really, really lucky.
So after about 6 months, I checked in with this individual. I said, hey, how's it going? I'm curious. How is this going? And the person says, well, I haven't really done anything yet. And I kind of went, whoa, okay, why not? Like, did you get a job? Like, what's going on? And the person says, no, I just haven't had any good ideas. Right?
Oh, man.
Now, this person went on and never didn't sell the book.
I feel bad for their parents.
Well, and the parent, it's that turned into a colossal waste of time. Again, I've spoken previously about how when I write, oftentimes I take PTO off of work. And then I go and I lock myself into a room or just chill at the kitchen table forever and annoy my wife. And I binge write. And I get everything done. Because if I only have a fixed amount of time to accomplish something, then by golly, I'm going to accomplish it come hell or high water.
Yeah. Now, this story makes me sad for a couple of reasons. Because basically that person's been set up to fail with the arbitrary time period. Later on, when you get going as a writer and you have deadlines placed upon you by your publishing house, that's okay, because by the point you're at where there's enough demand for your books to have deadlines, that's okay, because you have enough practice to have those ideas. You know how to cultivate them in your magical idea garden that is your brain. Ideas are literally everywhere, and I will have ideas. They'll just come to me, or I'll see something cool, or it'll be a cool visual, or there'll just be some interesting thought or some research kick I go off on, and I'll write them down somewhere. I'll have like a file, or if it's really cool, I'll just remember it, I'll note these things down. And a lot of times those ideas don't belong in the story that I'm writing right now. However, they could belong in the next story. Or sometimes you'll get 2 or 3 ideas that they don't seem to be related, but then give it a little time to percolate, and those things will click, and all of a sudden those 3 ideas will merge together, and boom, there's your next book.
Well, and literally ideas come from everywhere.
Oh yeah, constantly.
I mean, both you and I share a common love of just music. We both love music.
Oh yeah, we both write to music.
We both
love
write to music. Although I think you tend to trend more towards instrumental.
I'm more
right?
instrumental soundtracks, and I know you're more like metal. And,
I listen to the music that fits the mood of the story that I'm writing.
Yeah.
So if I'm writing, if the music puts me in the brain of a cyberpunk type thing, then I'm not going to use that music when I'm listening to, or when I'm writing, say, Servants of War.
Yeah,
right?
Servants of War, I was listening to like the soundtrack from The Witcher 3.
See, perfect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that book is literally 1917 meets The Witcher.
Yeah. Well, I talked about, like in a previous episode, I talked about where Son of the Black Sword came from, and it's because of a Hans Zimmer song.
Yeah.
Was the first spark. So there's definitely ideas in music, just the vibe you get. You ever listen to a song and like you start unfolding a music video in your head?
Absolutely.
Well, congratulations, you have what it takes to be a writer. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right. Or, one time at a previous job, the HR person sends me a message. Now, at the time, I was in charge of all fixed assets. In the technical term, for all of you out there who I know are just dying to understand the world of accounting.
We'll have to start an accounting podcast.
We should kind of start the accounting podcast. The accounting dojo. Yeah. Anyway, the HR person sent me a message and said, "Hey, do I capitalize God?" And I remember staring at that email for a good 5 minutes.
Because you're thinking in accounting terms?
And I'm thinking in accounting terms, and I'm going, well, how would a god be a fixed asset? How would you depreciate that? Like, I don't understand. Like is that a 5-year term? Is that a 10-year term?
5 million.
Is that a 30-year term? Like leasehold improvements? Like, how is this? And then after about 5 or 10 minutes, I realized, oh no, they're just asking grammar. Like, is it uppercase G or is that a lowercase g? However.
Well, that depends if you're talking generic or specific.
Exactly. However, the interesting thing about that is then I went, well, hey there. Hello, Mr. Idea. How would you capitalize a god? That means it's a product. How do you go from there? And so I have this buried short story that I've written about that, right? Ideas come from everywhere. From misinterpreting a word to mishearing a lyric in a song, to hearing a symphonic song and having that music video pop in your head out of freaking nowhere.
Yeah.
Or watching a show like we've talked about before and saying, hey, you know what? Wouldn't it be really cool if instead of this, the story had gone this other direction?
I've written so many things based, just ideas have come from the weirdest place. I have a character named Wendell the manatee. Wendell T. Manatee is a recurring character in my comedic stuff, I should say. Wendell doesn't show up in the serious books. But Wendell the manatee is this eloquent manatee. But where Wendell the manatee comes from was many, many years ago, long before I was a writer, I had a Ford Aerostar minivan, piece of crap. And everything on it leaked, including the power steering pump. And so whenever you turned the wheel, it would go, woo, it would make all these weird noises. And so one time I pick up my brother, and we're driving along, and I turn, and it's as I go around the corner, and my brother goes, what the hell is that, a manatee? and that just made me laugh, and that's actually where the original... Because manatees don't actually make noises in real life, as I've been told by many a marine biologist. But yeah, that's where Wendell came from, was that. And, well, heck, Monster Hunter. So the thing, my bread and butter, where it comes from was I was on the internet, and it was a discussion forum, it was a gun discussion forum, and I've given thank yous to these guys in the books, started by a guy named Ian McMurtry, who is an author now. Ian has gone on and done a lot of fun. He's done a lot of like humorous cop novels, the Law Dog Files. Get them on Amazon. But Ian has started this thread. This is many years ago. It was like lines I'd like to hear in a horror movie someday, and it was a bunch of gun nuts making cracks about because how most horror movies would be over if they starred gun nuts. Like the horror movie would be over in 10 minutes. Right? Oh, it's a horrible monster. Boom, And so all these gun nuts are making these cracks. And this one guy named Dillis Freeman made this quote as like, you know what the difference between me and you really is? You look out there and see a horde of evil brain-eating zombies. I look out there and see a target-rich environment. I laughed because it was funny. But then I was like, oh, man. Wow, that's actually a really interesting philosophical point of people who look out there and see this opportunity in the zombie apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And from that, and at the point, I kind of wanted to write, an action adventure novel anyway. That's really where Monster Hunter started germinating, was from that line. And in fact, I have that quote in the intro of the first book. It was just too awesome not to do. So it was like ideas like everywhere. We all have funny friends, right?
Oh, yeah. Usually it's me.
Okay, so to give you an idea, so Steve will know exactly what I'm talking about here. But when we're gaming, and we call it Writer Nerd Game Night because there's so many novelists in our game nights, one of us would have during the role playing game like some really super cool line. Somebody say some really amazing line of dialogue, and I swear we'd all like, "Whoa, that's badass!" But then we'd all look at each other like, "Oh, who's going to steal that line of dialogue first?"
Right.
Which one of us gets dibs on that absolutely
Suddenly it
amazing
turned
line?
into an episode of, or into the movie Knives Out.
Yeah, so the ideas, like, they're just honestly all around you.
When the idea to write Residue came into my brain, it came from several places. One of them was reading the book Necroscope by Brian Lumley.
Oh, yeah.
Phenomenal author,
Good
one of my favorite authors of all time. And the cover art's by Bob Eggleton, which means I love Bob Eggleton for eternity.
Oh, yeah.
And I was watching
Super talented.
And I was watching the show Chuck at the same time, right?
Yeah.
One super horrible horror author, and then super lighthearted action-y comedy.
But it
show.
has Adam Baldwin in it, which makes
And it has Adam Baldwin.
awesome.
And he's fantastic.
Because Adam Baldwin is the best, and I will brook no dissension on that on this podcast.
That's right. we never talk in absolutes unless we're talking about Adam Baldwin.
Yeah, Adam Baldwin wins.
So I had those two ideas floating around in my head. And like you said, on the surface, there's no way those two ideas have any relevance to each other. Necroscope is basically a piece of Cthulhu that falls to Earth and turns people into vampires. Chuck is about a secret agent and a girl who's hot, who's also a secret agent, but better at it. Right? Those two things.
I see where this is going,
Those
because
two
I've read
things,
Residue.
You have read Residue. So those two things on the surface have nothing to do with each other. And then one day, I remember having a conversation, and I don't remember even who with, but we were talking about young adult fiction and how in so much young adult fiction, half the book is the female protagonist curled up in a corner, lamenting about how some boy didn't smile at her the right way. And that's just exhausting to me. It's exhausting. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I would really like to write a story where, one, the YA story where the protagonist is a male, because boys read YA too, for crying out loud. And where the girl isn't just a flaming piece of garbage, where she's hyper, what's the word I'm looking for?
Competent.
Competent, thank you. We're writers.
And you made her not only just competent, but competent. And she wasn't just born competent because she's like, the story required it. She trained her butt off.
Exactly.
And she came from a background where it would make sense that she would train her butt off.
And so, and at one crazy moment in my brain, all those things kind of all slammed together. And I went, oh, dang, I can do weird psychic-y, horror monstery stuff, but like with two kind of good, funny characters that have a good relationship, and they're competent. And that's how Residue was born.
Yeah.
So you never know.
I can totally see that.
You never know where your ideas are going to come from. But if you're staring at these ideas and you're trying to force them into place, man, look, ideas are a dime a dozen. They're going to come. There's going to be thousands that are hitting you every day
when we come back from break, I want to tell the story of where I got the idea for Hard Magic.
All right.
Because
I know this one. This is a good
This
story.
is a trilogy born out of spite.
Yes. All right. So with that, we're going to take our break so that Larry can get his storytelling juices flowing, so he can tell the genesis of what becomes one of my favorite series by him, Hard Magic. We'll be right back.
Meet Jack Bishop, a normal kid at a normal school who is shocked to discover that he has the unexpected ability to see psychic residue left behind by both murder victims and monsters. When his father is abducted from the mysterious company where he works as head of security, Jack teams up with fellow student and mind reader Alexandra to search for his father and stop the series of murders happening in his hometown before it is too late. Steve Diamond's debut novel, Residue, is a young adult supernatural thriller for readers looking for action, suspense, humor, and horror. Read the book New York Times bestselling author of the Shannara Chronicles, Terry Brooks, calls an intense, high-energy, what lurks in the shadow, tale of monsters, both men and otherwise. Larry Correia, New York Times bestselling author of The Saga of the Forgotten Warrior, says Residue has the best prom scene since Carrie. Residue is available on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Pick up your copy today.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the WriterDojo. Again, I'm Steve Diamond, and I'm here with my good friend Larry Correia, and we're talking about the discipline of plot, or of idea management. Excuse me.
Yeah, so I was going to tell you guys how Hard Magic came about. I was brand new as an author, and I was at LTUE, which is a writing conference in Provo, Utah. And I think I just had a couple books out at the time, and they were all urban fantasy, was what they were considered. And so I was on this panel with some big heavy hitters. Lee Modisett, who's awesome. Dave Wolverton, so most of you know him as Dave Farland, who's written hundreds of novels, and Brandon Sanderson, who we've talked about before, and kind of a big deal, right? And then little old me, I was the noob scrub on the panel. And the panel was about something I can't even remember. Huge room, and they were mostly college students. And because at the time, LTUE was held at a college. It's not anymore, thank goodness, you know. And so this kid raises his hand, and he goes, I got a question, and blah, blah, blah. And he asked what the question is. I can't even really remember what it was. And I had a really good answer for that question. It was pertinent to me.
It had something to do with epic fantasy.
Yeah, but I had a good answer. And I was like, I was like, excitedly, I start to answer. The kid cuts me off. He cuts me off. He goes, no. You're just an urban fantasy writer. I want to hear what the epic fantasy writers have to say. And I was like, and I can't use the actual words that I muttered under my breath on the air because we'll get demonetized. But I was like, you little... So I sit down and like... I was torqued, right? And so the second the panel is over, I looked over at Dave, Brandon, and Lee. I was like, all right, guys, what are the rules of what's something in epic fantasy? And they tell me, it's like, well, it's usually a lot of big character, big plot, world-spanning characters. They give me kind of I was like, check. Got it. I got up. I was so pissed. I don't even remember who this kid is. I'm driving home with Mike Coopery, right? Who was my co-author on Dead Six. We're driving home, and I'm like, I have to write an epic fantasy next. And he's like, what? he's like, what's that? I was like, well, Brandon and Lee and Dave said it's this, and this. And Mike's like, okay. So I start brainstorming on the way home, and I start coming up with a plot. But I don't have a setting yet. I have a plot. I start coming up with a plot of Hard Magic. I walk into my house. I'm still fuming, and I'm talking to Mike. But at this point, we're kind of like, this is kind of cool stuff we're talking about. My son is sitting on the couch. At the time, he's just a little kid, and he's reading a comic book. And it wasn't even the actual comic book. It was like a Marvel art thing. And on the cover was Noir Spider-Man.
Yep.
And I saw that, and I was like, he's Spider-Man and with a fedora and a trench coat and a Webley revolver.
Such an iconic, awesome image.
Yeah, and so you know what I'm talking about. I looked at that, and I go, oh, that's badass. And Mike goes, yeah, stuff was way cooler when men wore hats. And then Mike goes, you know what else? They had Zeppelins, too. They had Zeppelins back then. And I stopped, and I was like, oh, because all of a sudden, that plot that we had just brainstormed on the drive from Provo to West Jordan, I was like, all of a sudden, it got crammed into a 1930s setting. And the next thing you know, I hurried up and I cranked that book out like, because I was enthused. And that's where it came from. The idea was basically a combination of spite, anger, and the fact that fedoras and Zeppelins are cool.
Undoubtedly so. So, I think this leads into a really good question then, which is kind of the whole point of this episode, the discipline of idea management. So you had these wonderful, great ideas that eventually turn into one of my favorite pieces of fiction that you've written. What was your process then for saying, okay, I've got these ideas. Which ones are the right ideas? Which ones are the wrong ideas?
That's a really good question, because just because it's a trap you fall into, a lot of writers, especially when you're starting out, and they feel like they're only going to write one book, they try to cram every idea into the book. This is where the discipline part comes. Now, very, very few writers can take every single idea in their head, unless they don't have very much room in there, and well, we know that guy too. But you can't cram everything in. There's a time and a place. And so sometimes you have like a really cool idea, but it just doesn't fit. I think we've all seen that, where there's like a book and it's a good book, but there's like this one really discordant element that just doesn't seem to fit. And usually I can tell, it's like, well, that writer thought that was a really cool idea.
And didn't have the heart to cut it.
So the discipline part is, okay, so you got all these cool ideas. This is where, like, we talked about outlining versus discovery writing before, but one of the things I like about outlining is I can go through and I can catalog all the really cool ideas that fit this particular setting. And the stuff that doesn't fit, well, I'll kind of stick that off to the side and I'll save it and let it percolate and stew, and there will be a cool spot for it sometime later. I have ideas of things that, like, I had this idea like 7 or 8 years ago, and I've never used it yet. It's still floating out there because I haven't had the right project to use it on yet. But so for Hard Magic, I started with those cool things where I was going to use the 1930s aesthetic, and then I immediately started doing research into that time period. I decided I was going to make it an alternate history.
Now, how much research did you actually do for Hard Magic?
Tons. I actually got myself, because I'm kind of a little fanatical. I have fixation issues, which is one reason I'm annoying, but also another reason that I'm successful, and that I will pick an idea and I'll get hyper focused on it and I'll learn everything I can for fun. And so I basically gave myself like the equivalent to a history degree of like 1920 to 1940. Checked out tons of books, read everything I could get my hands on, immersed myself in like the music, which I hate, by the way. I actually hate.
Really?
I hate the music of that time period.
Oh, interesting.
Which is interesting because I at one point, my friend I call Pirate Bob because of his piracy ability. And Steve knows Pirate Bob.
I know Pirate Bob.
Actually, speaking of ideas, there's a character named Pirate Bob in Hard Magic who is based upon a real guy.
There's a character named Steve Diamond in there that's based off a real guy too. Just throwing that out there.
He's in the second one.
Yeah.
Steve Diamond shows up in the second one, and then
gets tragically...
I won't say, well, no spoilers in the third one, Warbound. But
he's amazing.
He's a great character.
Larry should write a whole trilogy just about him.
I kill a lot of my friends in books. No, but so Pirate Bob was like, where's another of those ideas? It's like, I know this guy who's an old pirate. How am I not going to... I had to put him in this book with Zeppelins. So you start cataloging your ideas. Well, so Pirate Bob had got me several hundred songs of the 1920s to 1940s. So you start putting all this stuff together and you start going through your list of ideas. Like, this is cool, this is cool. I wanted to have this magic system that was using very hard rules, hence the title. So it's not a porno. Sounds like it when you first hear it, but it's not, I promise. And I had these different ideas for action scenes. Some worked in a setting with people with superpowers. I had some things I wanted to do in action scenes that I never was able to use in Monster Hunter because the main characters in Monster Hunter are primarily human.
Right.
So I can't have the heroes teleporting. I can't have the heroes changing the direction of gravity. But all of a sudden for Hard Magic, I could. So I had different ideas that I had out there for years, and all of a sudden I could start cramming into this book. And you just kind of go from there. So the discipline is know what to use, know what not to use. It's like cooking a dish. You don't use every ingredient in your cupboard or it's going to taste like crap.
Right.
You just use the certain ones that go together. Well,
and I think so much of this, like everything that we talk about, right? It comes down to practice.
Absolutely.
What's the thing they always say, that it takes 10,000 hours to become competent at any job that you do, or something along those lines. I'm probably butchering that phrase, but
they have done studies where it's to master a thing. It's about 10,000 hours of doing it.
Yeah.
before you're good.
And writing is no different.
Well, with writing, people always say it's 1,000,000 words.
Right.
I don't know if that's true. That seems like...
I think that's a pretty arbitrary number.
Yeah, it's a pretty arbitrary. I think it's going to be how intense you were during that and how serious you were in that. Because you could write 1,000,000 words of crap and still suck.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's like the 10,000 hour thing was, I remember it was like 10,000 professional quality hours of doing that as your job. To get... I think writing is probably the same.
Which in terms of actual time spent, that's 5 years.
That's...
Okay. That's a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
And so if you, like Larry says, if you're treating this seriously, if you are showing, and again, we use the word discipline on purpose. The word discipline, it has many different connotations, and we're kind of using all of them here.
Well, in the WriterDojo sense, this is one of those things you're going to go out and you're going to punch boards a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, that's idea management.
Yeah, you're going to wax on, you're going to wax off.
Yeah, this never gets old. This is something you're going to do your entire career.
And one of the things that we haven't really talked about is it's your ability to stay humble, and your ability to always be teachable and to learn from all of your experiences and to learn from your peers and to learn from your editors.
The humility is a great point, because that's where like the quality editor comes in. Because quality editor comes in and says, this is a bad idea. This thing you did here, this was not good. This doesn't work. I've mentioned Toni Weisskopf before and how much I love her, but Toni is a wonderful editor, and a lot of times she doesn't go in and take command and tell you, you must fix it this way. Toni comes in and says, this doesn't work because of this and this. Fix it.
Yeah.
And once you have a good relationship with Toni, after she's edited like, a dozen of my books, I one time got an edit back from her, and literally this is what the edit said. The edit at the top of the page said, this scene sucks, make it not suck. Greatest editor. All right. See, but that's true. So you got to have humility. So because you have an idea doesn't mean it's a good idea. There's a lot of terrible ideas out there too. As you got to be able to recognize, or a lot of times there are bad ideas, but in the hands of a capable artist who knows what they're doing, those can be twisted and turned into something valuable.
Well, let's talk about one of our mutual friends and guys we respect more than most people, and that's Jim Butcher.
Oh, I love Jim. Jim Butcher is one of the dude's a national treasure as far as writers go.
So imagine the Dresden Files, the idea of a wizard living in Chicago. Yeah. Imagine that in the hands of an author who didn't have the enthusiasm, who wasn't willing to cut ideas when they didn't work, who was willing to put the work in.
Yeah.
I mean, and every fantastic idea that's out there can be a crap idea in someone else's hands. However, the reverse is also true.
If you hear the pitch, Wizard in Chicago, that's going to be one of those that a lot of people would just butcher. It would be stupid.
No pun intended?
No, I didn't even, I never intend my puns. I'm not a pun guy. I always
intend my puns.
Well, thanks a lot. I punned. No, but in the hands of somebody less capable, that could be really stupid.
Again, we talk about, you and I both love Dan Simmons.
Oh my gosh. Dan Simmons is a great example ever of the master who could take the goofiest sounding ideas, weirdest pitch. Okay, I've described this before, but the novel Olympus and Ilium. The basic plot of Olympus is the space Jews are on post-apocalyptic Earth being guarded by dinosaurs and robots that are Muslims, but on Mars, the gods of Olympus are there, and the main character is a old history professor from Earth who's been brought back to life to report on the gods of Olympus as they do their thing, and it's got, Hector and Achilles and all that. Oh, except there's also the characters who are the space robots who, quote, Proust from beyond Jupiter. That's, and then you just bring them all together. And it's like, what the crap?
You
Oh, and Caliban's on a space station, and I can't even remember what else. It's like every weird freaking idea you can think of, Dan Simmons is just like, he makes it work.
Well, yeah.
He's so good.
And you almost feel bad for his agent, right? Because
except he gets 15%
his agent
of
hears
that.
the pitch, and his agent goes, well, I'm going to go pitch this to a publishing company. They're going to give you a whole bunch of money, which means I get a whole bunch of money. So high five, I guess.
We'll say that Dan Simmons is like what I've told people was like about idea. When I've talked about idea management before, Dan Simmons can get away with that. You might not be Dan Simmons.
Yeah, let's be real. None of us are Dan Simmons.
Yeah.
You know, I find that when it comes to idea management, I end up removing more ideas than I take in, because that lets me focus on the ideas that I really like and am excited for. Again, I'm a discovery writer, so excitement and momentum is key for me.
Yeah.
So if I'm getting too bogged down in too many ideas and I'm trying to juggle too much and too much is going out there, then I start getting lost. So by me excluding ideas, that actually gives me more freedom to work with the good ideas that I have.
Because you're not trying to shoehorn in marginal ones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you know, I never want my books to feel like a checkbox book.
Oh no, that's the
You know,
worst.
like I have a checklist and I'm like, well, I have to have characters that look like this or that
Oh,
have
we'll
this.
talk. We'll do a whole episode on the dangers of checklisting and why it sucks. But you know, there's about the shoehorning idea. Sometimes you have an idea that's just not. It's a good idea, but it's not the right time. So in Monster Hunter, like I knew who Agent Franks was from the beginning. Spoiler alert. You know, for those of you that read the series, you know this is a big deal. There was no place really in the first book that it was good or developed enough
or appropriate.
But in the second book, I was able to take a big chunk of the book to build up to this really awesome and fun reveal that people have loved ever since. So sometimes you have a good idea, and in that case, but it's not the right time yet. That's okay. Tease it a little bit. Throw it out there. If you're writing a series, throw that out there and be like, "Ooh, here's a tantalizing little clue." Mm-hmm. Even if you don't spell it out, they don't even realize it's a clue. Then when they read the second book, they're like, "Whoa, you planned that?" Yeah, I did.
I totally planned it.
Totally planned it.
So again, to kind of wrap this up, I want to use the word again that we keep using, and that's discipline. Have the discipline to really sit down and focus on the good ideas that you have and making them work. Focus on making sure that those are the right ideas. But when you also have good ideas, have the discipline to just save them for later.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the WriterDojo. Again, I'm Steve Diamond, and this is Larry Correia. Thank you all for tuning in. Take it easy.
WriterDojo is Steve Diamond and Larry Correia. Produced by Jack Wilder at Baron Hair Studios. Theme song, Word Mercenaries by Craig Nybo. New episodes come out every Wednesday wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/WriterDojo, by leaving us a 5-star rating or review, and by helping to spread the word. All questions and comments can be emailed to questions@writerdojo.com.
What the hell is that? A manatee?